Recording going. All right, good evening, guys. Ken at Tortoise Capital with a evening strategy podcast for June 1st, 2020. So I want to continue the threaded discussion about Joe's trading challenge. What's up, Joe? And we reviewed how you could have a view of trading as a martial arts paradigm, a lifelong journey of self-discovery, self-mastery that encompasses your entire relationship to the world, and that those martial arts derive from things that were needed in the practical world for survival in a difficult world, which became disciplines which grew up into the ethos of the martial arts, and that those martial arts have lately have developed a sport aspect that allows us to standardize, regularize, and make them safe for competition. And there's sort of a distinction between sport, martial arts, and street fighting, but that core idea of survival and what works on the street is sort of underpins everything. And so the difference between a martial arts perspective and a self-defense combatives perspective is the idea of the immediacy, the different mission, certain specific conditions, short-term horizons, specific outcomes, and very clear guidance on what should and should not be done. And the standards are immediate survival, quick and ruthless efficiency, and so forth. You can see the rest of them. And so on the basis of that, Joe suggested, hey, I wonder if there's a way just to do a trading strategy that's robust and adaptive, that uses these elements in this yellow box that have been covered in the last couple of weeks. I think there can be. I think there is. I added some thoughts yesterday about picking the target set right so that you have enough opportunities with reliable, robust targets so that you can implement all those tools. And that you must also incorporate some view of market and sector, because that single idea is so important for the attribution of results, that you've got to get that right or you're missing the opportunity and it'd be inefficient. And then you got to do the self work so that you, as the trader, are not the long pole in the tent here. You're not the one that's holding things back. And then when you enter that battle circle, then the results that you get that reflect all four of these contributors to the mix can then be built into lessons learned for the walking man to develop his knowledge in those 5 locations of head, heart, gut, hands, and feet, shared with a sense of purpose and renewable energy in our roundabouts on our pathway, to higher ground. So I was thinking some more about that and talking about it with my buddy Bob during our coffee talk. And so this was sort of my revelation last night. I should just take my own advice and say, look, if you don't want to study this stuff through a martial arts perspective, but just want essentially a one-day concise workshop on trading the supported spring crossing, then let's do that. Come and get what you really need in one day, like combatives, like self-defense, and learn one solid technique without worrying about the underlying legacy of the entire martial arts discipline and the ecosystem and all that jazz. Hey, all I want to know for my self-defense is, what do I do if somebody grabs me around the throat? What do I do if somebody pulls a knife on me? And so I just want to break free and get away. A combatives approach instead of I'm always trying to encourage a lifestyle approach, and that's because of where I am inside my own fishbowl. I see the value add of that over long periods of time, but not everybody wants or needs that. And so I need to shut up more and follow my own advice and give the people what they want. And so I think it's legit. Building on what Joe said, let's get that minimum mission essential stuff, give the people what they want and need, and then let the dojo be the dojo. You don't have to go to the dojo and work and do all that stuff. You might just stop in, get a cup of hot tea, get a life-saving technique that is robust and good for the next 20 years, and moving on. And Bob said, yeah, as he was thinking about that, there's a lot of what we would just white belts that are really just looking for that initial entry, that I don't need any more than white or yellow belt or green belt. And I need some familiarity with rock solid tools, and that'll give me an advantage against the vast majority of people with no skills. He said, Ken, you have a natural tendency to want to tell them everything you know for their own protection, to protect them against your own limitations and your own perspective. And so you end up giving them everything because of reasons. And he experiences that as an RIA with his clients, where he's trying to explain to them the voodoo that he does. And they just look blank and shake their heads. And it may be enough to be like One Punch Man, master one move, and it'll be enough. Some people will chase mastery, in that pursuit. But there is a foundation. Now, I think I've done as good a job as I could do so far up until yesterday with the reducing things down to the hybrid trading workshop. So it's just 5 patterns, and it's an integrated way to trade them in a certain way, and swing trading one day at a time without trying to go too far, too deep into the minutia of the details. You saw a little bit of that in the chat room today, where I just found myself explaining deeper and deeper and more about the frog and how all things fit together and standard deviations and all that jazz. And sometimes I just need to know what time it is. I don't need to know how to build a clock. And in Bob's view, the foundational things like the supported spring crossing, we're already in love with that thing. The supported spring crossing, connecting to the owl, and then the emerging dragon to the upside. And then the failure of those, which is the initial hybrid frog and then the collapsing dragon on the other end, you have all season purposeful patterns that are easily seen and defined, I believe. And you're going to be better than 90% of the herd. And it may just be that we need to just drill the supported spring crossing first and then move on to the other 5 patterns or whatever. I don't disagree. So that's exactly what was in my head last night as I was talking my way through the combatives versus the martial arts, that there are 2 views on what's needed. On one of them, on one end of the spectrum, you could say, hey, I want to learn how to live an intentional integrated life. That's what gets you towards that sort of martial art, fully integrated life is. And then probably for most of us, hey, I'd just like to know how to instinctively break away from a clothing grab or a hands around my throat situation in order to survive today. And that's what I need. And so let's do that. So that really is the difference between a martial arts and a combatives approach. And so I think I've got the martial arts things side of it done, and I'm moving towards that combatives one with the idea of the hybrid trading and the 5 patterns, and then even further, this supported spring crossing is really a way to even further refine that, to get down to the essential understanding of when is the RLXD a good entry. That's that's always the trigger, but when is the context right that is correct? So I think that sideways, or the supported spring crossing, is my latest effort to try to reduce it down to the absolutely minimum mission essential idea. So I just want to give you a comparison about how I think, from a judo perspective, of why I think judo and jiu-jitsu are a really good metaphor and good mental emotional training for trading. And Bob, I'm going to go through these points here in a hurry, but Bob says, probably more people would resonate with a carpentry framing analogy, and I tend to agree with him, that there's more folks that have probably worked with a tool at one point in their life than necessarily put on a gi and went rolling around on the mat. We're all victims of our own experiences. What's common about the carpentry, or what you pick your discipline of craft knowledge that requires some attention to detail, that's got levels and layers and depth to it, even if it's your professional work inside a craft or inside a profession, something about your experience. Maybe it was as a student. But there's craft knowledge, professionalism, immediacy, and value creation are all in there. So I want to tell you why judo and wrestling really works for me and how I see that tying together a lot of the explanations I try to give. So judo is the sport application of a martial arts discipline of jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu, traditional, incorporates striking and grappling and weapons, and a subset of that was developed for unarmed Japanese policemen to be able to subdue safely for themselves and for the accused, safely secure people. That's why this latest incident with this unfortunate crime is so troubling, because we've known for 100 years how to subdue people properly. And there is a martial art approach to that was violated. The principles of that was violated on many different levels. So judo is a subset of all that. It is a sports application that was developed so that people could train safely and yet also compete in a way that would allow them to go all in and really test it under rigorous conditions, but in a safe manner. And so you have to stylize that and restrict it in certain ways, so there's no eye gouging and biting and all that stuff, and the very strict elements of sport about it. The more sporting it becomes, it starts moving away from the central feature of street fighting and survival fighting and combatives, but there is 90% overlap in all those things. It's really, there's lots of debates on the margin about the difference between the sport and street fighting, most of which is hot air. But the discussion points I think are pretty useful. So here's 10 ideas about judo and wrestling and grappling and the martial arts that I think really are useful when it comes to how to develop trading proficiency in my experience. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. I'm just saying it's the only way I know how to do it. And if you're asking me to help you, it's important that you know how I think about it so that you can see where I'm coming from and maybe help me do a better job meeting your needs. So when you start off in judo, you start with a very rugged jersey, because you're going to use it a lot, and you're going to get thrown around, and you're going to throw people around, and it's going to come into contact with the world. So we just start off knowing that, and the rugged jersey is your thick skin before you've developed all the calluses. It protects you in that sense. And then we use a padded floor in the dojo, because until you've learned how to fall correctly, the earth is a really hard place, and it'll break your skull if you fall wrong, not just early in the training, but anytime if you fall wrong in the world, that hurts, and that could end the fight right there. So we spend time immediately in the first lesson how to fall safely and correctly in a relaxed, flexible, supple manner, because judo and life is going to be a lot of falling down, and judo's preparation for life in that sense. So it's not just preparation for judo, but it is connected to that whole lifestyle. When you fall well, you prevent injury, because you absorb the blow and you turn it into circular motion, and you spread out the points of contact. You take away your own sharp edges like elbows and wrists and head, and you tuck and roll. And that prevents injuries. It raises energy, because the momentum you get from rolling allows you to accelerate through that, and you spring to your feet with more energy. And you learn to use the momentum of gravity and your weight and the energy of your opponent who threw you, and you learn to use that energy instead of fighting it. And if you're holding on to the opponent, or if they're holding on to you and they won't let go of you, when you are falling and you're holding on to them, you're throwing them. So when you load up a guy to throw him in judo, all you do is you do the same judo break fall that you learned, how to get to the ground without hurting yourself, tuck and roll. Only now you got somebody on your back, and now you're throwing them as you fall. And if they won't let go, that just makes it easier to throw them, because you're trying to grip them and load them up and then execute a shoulder roll or some kind of roll that translates your energy into them, and then you land on top of them. Kind of a brute force and ignorance. Well, in judo and jujitsu, there's hundreds of throws and variations, and all you really need, though, is a couple that work on most occasions that are well suited for you, and so you can go to either side, left or right, forward or back, from any starting position, so that you have this go-to set of a couple moves, and that's all you really need. It's true in soccer too, by the way. Now, when you start practicing those moves, and I've said before, you don't fear a guy who knows 1,000 moves, but you fear a guy who knows a couple moves but practiced them 1,000 times. You will naturally develop your own preferred style and your own set of how to enter, how to get into your checkpoints or critical states, and then how to get into and out of that throw, with certain adaptations about what to do if the opponent does this or does that. But these all tend to be thematic and recurring, and so you end up finding a couple if this, then that rules that are all connected to your primary throw. So just some variations on a couple themes, and that's enough. You learn through doing how to flow through a series of chained movements. Like, so I can enter, I can load him up, I try this way, he resists, I go the other way, he tucks and rolls, I roll with him and throw him again. So you get these little chained events that go through a series, not of individual episodes, but a flow state of rolls and throws and moves that end up with you in some kind of winning position. And then what you learn by training in a flowing motion through those chains and checkpoints is that you quite often come back to a set of critical states, like our doji or our RLXD, or that momentary pause at the top of a Z3 excursion. Is that the end of the entire move, or was that just leg one of the next bigger move? And so what you realize is you keep coming back to these roundabouts. That's another beauty of that narrative that kind of pulls things together. It's in the roundabout. You come back in there and you recharge and reset. And you figure out where the next relaxed point of departure might be. So if you try a throw and it doesn't work, you come back and get set, and you're locked up, and you're hand fighting and jockeying for position and feinting and reacting until you find the next moment of low risk advantage. You try your next move, and so on, and roundabout. So that roundabout metaphor and this whole cyclic motion of energy and awareness that is represented in circular motion is a good representation of how this style of trading differs from what we might think of. Think about that energy maps that we did a couple of weeks ago, the straight line tug of war, unfair up a hill against a fat guy, and all the forces of nature conspiring against you to suck the energy out of you, which is exhausting. And converting that instead to that roundabout energy flow of the water cycle and natural forces, and relax and breathe and float and flow and guide and nudge and be part of the natural process and be one with that. That's the roundabout metaphor is a really nice way to represent that in all things. And so our goal then would be to be strong and yet supple in our core, our central strength, and then emphasizing balance, and learn to be feeling the forces in motion around you, learn to adapt and flow with them for leverage and momentum without straining, without trying too hard. And what it comes down to is something like this new pattern of judo trading or jujitsu style trading. Relax, breathe, approach, grip, get your hands on it, feel it, the energy and the flow, roll with it, and then release when it's time, and repeat. And so Bob said, yeah, probably more people would resonate with a carpentry framing analogy. I'll try to develop one for tomorrow, but I really think that if you appreciate what I just said there and kind of connect it to water cycles and flow and all that, you probably can sort out the best analogy for you and how it fits into your practical professional body of knowledge. Pick the thing that you know the most of. Maybe it's driving, maybe it's singing, maybe it's music, maybe it's whatever you do. What are those essential flow states where you've learned to develop your practical expertise. Think about the note I wrote yesterday. It says, where does your sustained knowledge of the world and how it works really come from? Was it a 2-day intensive uh, fire hose approach and try to master everything? Or was it the patient accumulation of things that you tried and adapted and used and repeated and made it your own and incorporated it and then built on it like a patchwork or a mosaic, occasionally reorganizing or resetting on moments of inspiration that allowed you to see maybe larger patterns and become a little bit more efficient? How did your professional bodies of knowledge develop? I think more folks learn from that approach, the evolutionary approach, than the sudden flash of lightning. And even if you do experience that revolutionary aha moment, there still is how to build that out in a practical way so that it becomes unconscious competence. And we're back into that roundabout and lifestyle learning approach. So I would just say that in the combatives orientation, we've got to get the essentials right. Like if you're being choked, you got about 8 seconds. If he knows what he's doing, you got less than 8 seconds before you are choked unconscious, not from lack of air, but by cutting off the blood flow to your brain. And so neck chokes are the thing. Or he breaks your arm, and then the fight is essentially over because now you're a one-armed man in a um, boxing match. So that's what I want to say about this sort of combatives approach and why I've been emphasizing more, and I'm going to emphasize tonight, that supported spring crossing and trying to make the markups bolder and less of the bar by bar and more feel the flow and look at it in that way. So that's why I would challenge you to this. And hat tip to Eugene for finding eBay just when we needed it. A perfect example. He's not in here to be embarrassed in public, but maybe he'll listen to this again. So eBay Mountain. Begin today's obstacle course. Welcome to eBay Mountain. So draw a blue circle around every supported spring crossing. I might just have you do this instead of doing it, but try this one on for size. Just by rapid inspection, there's one. There's one. This is not one. Unless we zoomed in so close and we said, oh, you know what, there's like 1 or 2 dots in there that may have gotten you. So I'll just leave it on there. This might have been one, although it never really broke out. But I'll give you credit for that one, and I'll give you credit for this one, if you found those. Place a minimum manageable risk box of 30 cents risk under each one of the entries. So inside that, then, I'm going to find a specific entry. And I'm not going to try to overthink it. I'm just going to say, like right there, I'll take that one. And maybe that one doesn't even work because it never broke out, but we'll say it does. That's fine. And this one. Now I'm going to, so if those are the entries, where's my 30-cent risk box? Now, in the context of this, 30 cents is huge. Look how big that 30-cent risk box is compared to the Z3 pinch. It's huge. And compare that to a risk box that is built out of the actual exit that we're supposed to be taking, and that is like the the PSAR box. So that. Look how big that risk box is. Nothing. And these are the execution risks. But I said, go ahead, try a 30-cent box and put that underneath the under your entry. Let me draw another one of those. You know what you could use that 30-cent risk box for? Position sizing risk. Just saying. Compare it to the frog box. It's probably smaller than a frog box. Now, just by inspection, were you ever at risk of taking a full 30-cent per share loss? That's about less than one. That's about 2/3 of 1% in eBay. Right there. So that's about 30 cents, I guess. Never. Not even close. Now, you've got your entry. Now pick any exit strategy that feels correct to you. Let's just try a trailing stop of 30 cents and see where we get out. So this first trade with just a 30-cent risk box, you don't get out till this third green dot way over here on the far side after the RL270 has rolled over. And you only gave back half the move to the VWAP. And so therefore this other one works pretty well too, because that it didn't get taken out until there either. And what's this first trade win if you do that? That much? Compared to your 30-cent risk box, 2R. And that's on an extraordinarily wide, call that your position sizing risk. Hey, so if I had $400 of risk per trade, and I said I could, and they divide that by 30 cents, I could have 1,300 shares. Okay, round it down to 1,000 shares. You know, that's $600 to me. Now, what about these other ones that didn't work? Well, it's pretty clear that you're going to lose a fraction. Like when these things work, they work, and when they don't work, they don't. They fail right away. So there's no reason to stick around longer. There's no reason to stick around for a 30-cent loss on that one. The signal that triggers that is, guess what? The collapsing dragon. If you get a collapsing dragon signal going against you, you know what you should be doing? Stop and reverse. So that's what it looks like with a 30-cent risk. How about a 20-cent risk box as a trailing stop? A little bit better entry, same thing. Identify emerging dragons. Now that you've done that, let's take a look at our little emerging dragons. So how do we find emerging dragons? Let me just make that foolproof. All I'm doing is marking off the previous RL10s. Guess what every one of those things is? A potential to add another position. Or if for some reason you had gotten out on any of those pullbacks that occurred in there, so you want to start building up fractional positions into a really nice position in a measured way. There's 4 opportunities to get back in it. Oh, how about a summer supported crossing? If you like the spring supported crossing, guess what that is right there? That's even better than the little counterpart trade right here. Every place you see an emerging dragon where it took out a previous RL10 peak, that means by definition there had to have been some kind of little retracement in here. Just so you can see this. If that's a good entry on the emerging dragon, guess what that is? That is a supported summer crossing, especially going past the VWAP. And if this is a good entry, so I'm going to put this little guy here in, excuse me. I'm going to put this little guy in blue so you can see if that yellow dot is good, that little blue dot is better. Guess what that is? That's a supported fall crossing. I wouldn't argue with this. So every one of those has a supportable RLXD continuation pattern. So what did you have? You had a little bit of a pullback. So you're going up, and then it experiences a moment of pullback. And then it resumes right away again. So here's your little measured pullback. It never breaks down below the previous RL10 dip, if you will. And every one of them is featuring a RLXD resumption. And then it breaks through and keeps going. And that's where your confirmation is. But every one of those is a potential moment of price improvement. So I get, actually, this should be over here. That one was just a good one anyway because it was the supported spring crossings. But you see the point. So you just identified emerging dragons and supported fall and summer crossings. Now you could go through here and identify some owls. Where would be the owls in this big old place? Well, if we call this an unambiguous move and the RL30 rolls over, the owl is probably like right there. If you count this as this might be an owl. If you call this an unambiguous move down, I really don't. I just think that's a pocket continuation. But what you have is you have an RL30 rollover and a collapsing dragon and an RLXD and an unambiguous previous move. That's an owl short. How's that for a turning point? Look at your RL90 rolling over here and your RL270 rolling over there, and look at your VWAP down here. That should be setting off alarm bells in your head left and right. That run is done. Look at the time of day. It just got through lunchtime, and that was an amazing upward move up to the top of, like American Ninja Warrior and Mount Midoriyami, right? Ninja Warrior. Well, here's what I want you to do on your screen right now. Put your thumb on the VWAP, the orange dot, and your index finger, your pointer, on the RL270. Start them off down here at the owl, where it works, where they are pinched together, and then they're going to be pinched back together way over here, off the chart a little bit, but it happened because this thing went down even further than it shows here. It stopped right there, but it actually came all the way back for perfect symmetry all the way down here. So between those 2 points, those 2 purple dots, I want you to just put your index finger on the purple line and your thumb on the orange line, and just watch those things as they begin to stretch apart. You know, here was a time when that purple line and the orange line were perfectly balanced. And then here was a time when they got, oh, sorry. Let me draw that as a better orange. You know, after this first couple of moves up, now you've got a zone of separation. So you have your pointer finger on purple and thumb on the orange. Feel your hand expanding as this thing continues to move up. Now, price started to pause and hesitate and got into that Z3 pinch, and it was now exactly in the middle between the RL270 and the VWAP. Which one is right? I don't know, but it's in a critical state, and guess what you got there? A supported spring crossing, and it told you right away what was going on. Didn't fail to VWAP, took off for the next leg up until you get to this point of maximum excursion up here. And now look how spread apart those 2 different measures of fair value actually feel. But now you get the owl entry, and now this thing starts collapsing. The RL270 rolls over faster than the VWAP, which is mathematical. And now they're coming back together, back into the station. And then now the long-term guys say, yeah, you know what? We gave it a shot. I'm coming back to this fair value way down here at the VWAP. I guess that VWAP acts like a giant magnet, you might say. And guess what it does? It actually, the price, if we were to draw price now as blue, you know, there was a time in here where price was exactly in between, and then it moved up to join the fair value, came back to the next checkpoint, which was there's probably an owl in here and a collapsing dragon. We haven't even marked the collapsing dragons yet, but now it's collapsing, and now it's back to joining the VWAP, and now it overshoots because that's what happens with traders and their momentum. And this thing ended up going all the way down here and then closed back up towards here. The VWAP magnet. And this represents the maximum stretch of the power of the traders to pull it away from the fair value. And this is the path that it took for that. You can feel the exertion pulling that thing up the hill. So flow with that like water. And then water rolls downhill. You have to pump it up, and then it just flows downhill. That's why the collapsing dragon is my favorite. Now we've identified the owls. Let's now come down here and mark off the supported winter crossings to the downside. Guess what that is? That is a front run, ever so slightly, of the owl. So where are those things at? Let's get this. That was our owl. Let me get some of this out of the way now. I made the point I wanted to make on these. So if this big purple dot was our owl, where is the supported winter crossing? There's that's also a winter crossing right there. This one isn't quite yet because that's fall. But here's a supported winter crossing. Here's a supported winter crossing. There's a supported winter crossing. In fact, the same exit that got you out of that supported spring crossing that we were going to try, how hard would that have been to say, yeah, that didn't work, and then just follow the collapsing dragon south? Easy. This one, by the way, also ended up coming all the way down here to 45 even. So there's another whole leg inside that. So those are the supported winter crossings to the downside. You're going to love that. And now identify the collapsing dragons. The same way that we drew these lines across the ascending peaks of the RL10 and the head of the dragon, do this to the belly of the dragon and the belly of the RL10s and map out your collapsing dragons. You know what you just did there? You just constructed a series of chain trades. And now if you all you got to do is study the eBay example, and all of the elements of chain trading are found on one single stinking chart. Thanks, Eugene. I mean, you got Z3 pinches. The only thing you don't technically have is probably a Z3 is the super pinch. Although, if I forced myself to, I might say this spot over in here, um, you know, I'd have to measure the distance from Z3 to Z3 to see if that's a super pinch. This one is pretty close here, I would say. I'm going to call it that it is, like right in this little moment. That is a 20-cent risk box. So we had our 30-cent risk box. Look at that. That's a Z3 super pinch. That's a super pinch right there. And what's that? That's like the acorn that's ready to go in either direction. In this case, it went down. Why is that the least surprising move? Because the VWAP's down here and it's in the afternoon, and the rest of the market was struggling, and the nation is on fire while the world watches us with breathless anticipation. So now you can take this little structure of the obstacle course, and now you can start building out your lens of all of these primary patterns, starting with supported spring crossing. That's the way you want to go. That's the way I want to go. And then I'll tell you the supported fall crossings to the downside, or better yet, supported winter crossing, which front runs the collapsing dragon. That one's just so good in times of crisis. Holy mackerel. That's how you break the chokehold of what to do and thinking too much. That's what you do. You just do that battle drill right there. That's your whole workshop. Okay, today, let's see what we got. Okay, our 10-day range is only now 4.5% because the 10-day low from Friday has now moved up to here. So that cut that whole 10-day range in half. Now it's a more tightly compressed 4.5% 10-day range. Tracing that 10-day range, look back from here. This was today's high and low, and it closed very well. It had a fractional gap, and this was the surprising move to me today. It failed to fail and gave an orderly move to the upside, so I just did what I was told and followed the water. Massive goodness. I was waiting for the world to be on fire and collapse, and it didn't. So failure to fail was information. Morning hook, and off we went. Opened, closed pretty well. Pretty narrow range for a world being on fire. Here's the 10-day high, the 10-day look back, 10-day low. Our dragon is sloping upwards. The RL30 projection is positive and good to go. The PSAR projection is positive and good to go. Our 10-period regression line is still favorably sloped up, and it closed right on the fair value today at a peak of the RL10, right on the Z2 line, and a fraction away from a 10-day high, 30-day high breakout, and the next price is the Z3, and then a Z3 excursion, which goes back about 20 days. So those are the next two targets to the upside, and all it's got to do is get through 306, and then 310 and 314 are in range. Could it get there in one day? Yeah, look at the size of these bars. Those can all get you from here to there in a heartbeat, and that's a runaway upside move. How can that happen while the nation's on fire? Because the separation of Main Street from Wall Street. This is a health check on the oligarchs and their monies, and they're pretty happy right now. You know, the firewalls will burn themselves out. The people will become cynical and do as they're told. We'll see. Hope not. Hope to change the world. But meantime, this is what the score sheet looks like for the company, man. So support or resistance to the upside is the 1-day high, 10 and 30-day high in the Z2. The Z3 target is here. The low of the day, 303 essentially. Skin of the dragon, spine of the dragon, and sloping up, and the belly or the bottom skin of the dragon in this orange zone, acting as a strong buffer of support. Then the PSAR buffer, the 10-day low, and then you don't even get to the Bollinger Band mean until 289.5-ish. The dragon belly, way over here, was the last time it really tested, and once it broke through, it's been north of the dragon. Dragon is floating right along the north shore of the river. Price is in between Z2 and Z1, so just marching steadily along. Hasn't had an exaggerated excursion. It's just steaming steadily northward like a freight train, with a promissory note to bail them out on every time that there's been a threat. It sold off and it recovered. Sold off, it recovered. Sold off, it recovered. So they keep buying it. The fix is in. Quite a long buffer, though, between the fence line to get into abnormal, which is the other side of the river at Z-1. That's the Z1 stop at 281. And with our price at 305, that's $24 on 300. It's about 8%. So it's an 8% buffer from here to the southern edge of normal. We're still in the summer. We've cleared the Red River, so we have a long side bias, and up we go. What worked today? So the S&P was up 0.4. Steel, McDonald's, materials up 0.7. The Russell was up 1. Brazil, finance, and UDOW all better than 1. Amazon, Apple, oil, lumber, Japan, and precious metals, all of our faves, all better, in some cases almost 2% better. Even more better now. Energy up 1.7. Cliff up 2. Euro-Asia, emerging markets, and real estate all at 2 1/3. Virgin Galactic 2.8, oil exploration 3, Mexico 3, Twitter 3, Facebook, Alcoa, clean energy, Boeing, all better, almost 4%. Asia less Japan 4%, U.S. Steel 5, Simon Property 6.5, Tesla 7.5. What was worse? So key leaders winning. A pretty broad mix of equities. You notice tech wasn't up there, so it wasn't tech today. It was the other pieces, the infrastructure and opportunities. Diamonds were right in there. Caterpillar, Google, Aussie. There's tech. Walmart, Microsoft, Home Depot, eBay, which was, you saw it climb the mountain and then fall off the mountain. It was in such a critical state that they pushed that thing as hard as they could, gathered in all the buying pressure, and then all of the hot air left the balloon and it got smacked. More failure on the downside tomorrow as they try to punish the guys that were still holding on but are sweating it with another day of selling. Watch for that to happen. That would maximize the pain of the short-term traders. That'll teach them. Treasuries down 1%. Healthcare -1. Merck, Intel, Cisco -1, 1.5, and 3. Gilead and Pfizer. Pfizer just got smacked. I think it was earnings. And then closed with the doji. So it may be time for, the recycling and then the reconfiguring from that nonlinear sell-off, that harsh sell-off. That's one of the reasons don't hold them through the earnings. They just got smashed. There was some questions about what the seasonality of things, so I just want to make sure that we're square on this. So there's two things to look at. There's the MACD compared to the zero line. And so here's the zero line, this blue line in the middle. So winter consists of the MACD line is below the zero line and the slope is negative. So from point to point is winter. MACD is less than zero and the MACD line slope is down. That's winter. Spring is the MACD line is below zero, but the MACD slope is up. So it has reversed and is now sloping up. That's spring. Oh, it didn't get above the zero line, but it started to slope down again. That's the legendary winter, spring, winter. And why do you love that? Because of reasons. Look at this collapse. Winter, spring, winter. And now spring, coming back to here. And U.S. Steel today, 2 months later, is trading up here around 8.5 to 9, right in this area here. It went all the way down to 4 and then back up to 8.5. So there's some real beauty in this kind of orderly move in U.S. Steel. Holy mackerel. Swing champion. Trades really well intraday too. But what about summer? So when this MACD line gets above the zero line, when it's MACD greater than zero and the slope is up, you have summer. When it's above the zero line but the slope is down, you have fall. Winter, spring, winter, spring. So there's your definitions. The TED River, that should read the Red River, is simply a guide to the context of previous moves. How harsh was the winter? How much did it pull away? And then as it marches its way back through the Red River, you get a sense of a return to normalcy in that relationship. So that's what the Red River is doing for us. That's some dynamic improvement right there. What's the interpretation of those things? In the winter, you should have a short bias in collapsing dragon and crush it. Spring, tentative longs, like you might be thinking about it. I never got the RLXD, did I? Nope, I sure didn't. And I didn't. And I didn't. Maybe I did slightly. But then when that fails, it's the other way. Spring, supported spring crossing. Hooray. With a stop here, you won't lose money on that trade. Summer, you should be long in the growing season. Oh, here's a summer. Oh, yeah, I should be long in the growing season. Fall, preserve profits and consider the possibility for second plantings. Supported fall crossing. but be ready for onset of winter. You got to make bank and get harvested in here to protect you in the long winter. I love the collapsing dragon. This is why. That feels a lot easier than climbing up the stairs or pumping water up a hill. So just to be clear on all that, okay? So here's some pro tips. Here's the UDOW from today. Here's where it closed yesterday. And what did we have? We had a harsh winter, RL10. Notice the right here is where that little guy where that RL10 slope reversed and crossed the baby dragon. Notice that gives us an alert for an impending seasonal change. Supported spring crossing at the VWAP with a stop right here at the belly of the dragon, 25 cents. And then in the first 30 minutes, it goes from here and goes all the way back to the resistance level of previous dragon humps and RL10 humps, and then started to break out again. I'm not going to lose money on that trade. Look what we have here. Spring, summer, cross, cross, supported summer crossing. Second position. Or if this got you out, that gets you back in. If that didn't get you out, second position. If that got you out, I'm not ashamed or embarrassed or offended, then your trade looks like that. What kind of stop? Hey, when the Z1 line takes out your entry, there you go. Or jump it from here to the Bollinger Band mean. Yeah, what if that got you out? Okay, get out. If that got you out, then that should get you in. Why? Emerging Dragon and an RLX crossover. The RL10 didn't even get through the Dragon. Didn't even hit the PSAR. So just feel that flow. Pro tip. Supported spring crossing. Oh, Mexico. Oh, how much do I love Mexico? All of it. I love all of Mexico. There's your hybrid frog. Here's where it closed yesterday. There's your 10-cent risk, 12-cent risk maybe. When the PSAR gets above your entry, bring your stop from here to there. Pick up a Z1. Exit. Want more? There's a, if this got you out, second dot gets you in, and that's a RLX, that's a supported fall crossing, continuation in the pocket, or play. I want the extra certainty of the emerging dragon. Okay, that's what you're giving up, is that little extra fractional. And if this got you out, I'm not ashamed or and this might get you back in, and then this will get you out again. Pro tip. Mexico, hybrid frog, frog champion. If that wasn't good enough, Simon Property Group in a critical state, it's going up for reasons. Do the reasons matter? No, they do not. It was in a critical state. It can go large in either direction. It does that all the time. $0.40. Supported spring crossing. Never look back. Emerging dragon. Why not? Winter exit. If you feel like it, supported spring crossing. Tightly managed stop. You won't lose money on that trade. Pro tip. Devon Energy. Oh, never better. We call that one as the critical state. It triggered short on daily charts. The beginning of a short after a nice run up. So that puts it in a critical state. It could fail. It could fail big. It did not. It did the opposite of that. Supported spring crossing. Risk. $0.10 execution risk. When the PSAR gets above your exit or your entry, maybe like right here, adopt a Bollinger Band mean. Maybe you get out there, maybe you didn't. Or adopt a, once you get to no lose, and now the Z minus 1 takes out your no lose, pick this up. Or pick a VWAP and RL90 or something. Pick some management point of view that respects what you want to preserve versus risk. Maybe that little pullback got you out right in here. If it did, the supported fall crossing, next leg up, gets you in, or you play or you play an emerging dragon. I want you to notice that when you wait for the emerging dragon, you're getting a little more certainty, but you're giving back a chunk every time. Mathematically, it has to. The tightest stop you'll ever have, the least you'll give up to find out that you were wrong, is the supported RLXD with a stop at the belly of the dragon or at the PSAR. Take your pick. UDOW, 1 minute, same thing. This is the one where, let's see, yeah, it had, this is where we stopped it before. It had just broken out above, the previous high. And so, and it did give a sharp down, and you might have tried 2 shots. Here's a supported spring crossing, I would say. And that one probably scratches or a fractional loss, and then you get another one here, and that one pays for it. Yeah, so this was DIA. This was the try, that was the follow through, and then this thing went up really strong. So that gives you the view of UDOW, but through the DIA lens. And if you just use a Z2 stop or Z1 stop, you're in that move all the way to there. I want you to notice on this one for this is Virgin Galactic, just something to watch for, opportunity while you're just looking at your stuff. You know, here's the RL90 rolled over. So this is on 1 minute chart. The RL90 rolled over, came all the way down to here before it started to roll up. That's what makes this supported spring crossing so nice, because you get some confirmation about, from the next higher time frame. And now look at the agreement about what fair value is going to be. So you got to learn to see that as the opportunity. That's the opportunity right there. A reversal at noon. They stretched it as far as they could in one direction. Supported spring crossing. The RL90 rolls over. It's now an unambiguous move down, a harsh winter. Bang. Target. And that thing paid off. Zooming in now on SPCE, this is a 3 minute look. So this is the same one. This is what that turning point looks like on a 3 minute chart at noon. Here's some things that you should be looking for. Here was a maximum excursion of the RL10, and then it flinked up, didn't cross the baby dragon, had a slight crossing, and then immediately reversed. So it sold off. Pause, resumption. Is that a collapsing dragon? It sure is. Second leg down. Now you have winter has now turned to spring, and it crossed the baby dragon, which is a alert for two things going to happen pretty soon. RLXD, PSAR flip, changing of the seasons. There's your supported spring crossing at 1748. Here's your PSAR stop at 1730. And that's an 18-cent stop, and this is on a 3 minute chart. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars later, so in less than 20 minutes, you've gone from 1748 to 1773, which is 25 cents on an 18-cent stop. So just leap and strike and put your stop in here so you have some room to wiggle. Now you'll get paid. You're keeping 2/3 of the gain. It's at the edge of the dragon, and you're protecting price moved to the far side of the Bollinger Band mean. So didn't wait for the PSAR to get higher than my thing. I just said, you know what? That was enough. Now this should work because it just went from spring to summer. Awesome. So in the good feelings, I just say, you know what? Let me just go ahead and lock in a win, and I'm not going to lose money on that trade. How about that? If that's what it looked like on a 3 minute chart, this is the entry indicated at 12 o'clock. Here's what that looks like on the 1 minute chart. And now here is your supported spring entry at 62.15, not 62.18. And you have a 20-cent initial risk here. And now you can move that stop up in here. So you're getting in about 15 minutes earlier. So this, you'll notice that this was at 11:45 instead of at 12. This little collection of price action in here is what got you in on the 3 minute chart. But the supported spring crossing happens about 15 minutes earlier on the 1 minute chart. So you know what you could do is you could have been managing this thing like you were on the way down, starting at, excuse me, let me get the big red arrow on here. Come on, Kenneth, get your big arrow going. So as this is coming down at about 11:30ish, and now it starts stalling right here. When this crosses the baby dragon, when the RL10 becomes spring and a crossing of the baby dragon, this is at 11:45, 48, 51. It's telling you in the next couple of bars something good's going to happen. So you got the early alert at 11:51. Here's 11:51 inside here. You know what? You could see this happening and all this support, and instead of taking this entry, maybe you just want to come in at 11:52. Just 3 minutes. Oh no, I'm sorry, it's still 3 minutes. I'm on one. Sorry. Here's what that rascal looks like. Now you're getting your entry at 17:48 instead of much earlier. So, just saying. Here's kind of that pro tip on UDOW. You're watching for the fall, winter, spring supported crossing. There's your entry at 62.14, 25-cent risk. By this time, it's into the summer, and it tested the dragon and then held. Why not just take, and now the PSAR just eclipsed your entry. Go ahead and strike and just lock in that little gain. That's 15 cents. That's, on a 25-cent risk, that's a 0.6 of you're protecting your execution risk. On this one, on finance, finance was in a critical state. We said yesterday for 20 minutes we're talking about. Hard to believe that finance is underperforming with all that free money. It was in a critical state, and off to the races. Hybrid frog entry here, tight stop there. That's also a supported spring crossing. Tight stop. You've got a 7-cent stop for execution. Summer, fall. If that gets you out, this gets you in, or this gets you in as emerging dragon. And now it doesn't matter which one of these exits you take. They're all going to be about at 23.69, which is 26 cents on a 7-cent risk. That's 4-to-1 execution risks, and an opportunity to have added a second position here. If this one gets you out, that's fine. You might have gotten in here and then these scratch you out, but it counts. It's the first move, minimum manageable risk box, supported spring crossing, and then by looking at the previous day's charts, you can see when it's in a critical state, and off you go. That's everything I wanted to cover today on the training. Just a quick look at the report. That's posted on Patreon already for you. And in the little handout area. I still went longer than I wanted to today, but I think there were some points to reinforce about supported spring crossing. So going a little long. So we've already seen that report. We are strongly overbought in all the short-term look-back periods, still sideways normal. The risk Z is supporting the long side structure. Still have a lot of choppy market to unwind here. ADX is only at 15.9, so still room to grow. All of the internationals are the ones that are most likely to collapse. If the market collapses here, then those are already overreactions and weaker than the U.S., so those would be your targets. Pfizer was a big sell-off today, so it's probably ready for the changing of the guard. Devon Energy had a nice rebound today. I'm looking for more momentum there and plenty of room to the 10-day high. Many dojis today, in spite of all the social upheaval. No big breakouts on the NDXs. Pfizer, Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson for the auto framers look good. Pfizer, because of the 7 on the RSI2, it's the only thing that suffered. It was down 7%. So that's why it gets smashed. Boeing was a big winner today at 5%. Or I'm sorry, at 3.8%. And no other real signals other than that overreaction. Tons of overreaction shorts. This is the test of the market. That little rebound out of the oversell and the fact that we're still at the 200-day moving average is why this could be a dead cat bounce. But the big winners today, Latin America, Mexico, Asia less Japan, oil services and exploration. Losers today, tech and treasuries. That treasuries feel significant in that may be a rotation out of there back into equities. You can see these are the top percentage performers on the super pinch. These are the, so XLI and IBM are the most tightly pinched inside the stack. You can see how tightly they are pinched in terms of the Z-score of pinching. So they're the ones that are most likely to do the breakout from a consolidation range. Japan is continuing to march, looking pretty good. I think Mexico and Brazil are really the hidden stealth trades in here. Some good auto framers still available: Treasuries, Walmart, Pfizer, Microsoft, man, buying it on sale. The daily squeezes, because of the tight range compression today, you're getting some really nice one-day opportunities for pops, and I'm seeing Microsoft, Treasuries, that Intel, SPY itself, tech could be just another nice way to play the XLK. Lots of things back in the summer on daily, only 2 in the spring or in the daily fall. So a combination of winter, spring, and daily summer is tentatively optimistic. So plenty of room to grow to the, to 310 and beyond in the market. And then these are the clear leaders. Pfizer just got smashed today because of earnings. Travelers and Procter, on the other hand, were the breakout players. And then in the ETFs, look at all these guys making 3-day, 10-day, and 30-day breakouts to the upside. So emerging markets in Asia less Japan are feeling like lower risk than the U.S. that's on fire. And I think that's what's happening right there. Otherwise, market conditions back to normal and the grind. All right, that's everything I wanted to cover today. Plenty of work to do tonight for continuation patterns for tomorrow. Let's get after it again. Concise, combatives, supported spring crossing, contextual crossings. Get in there snug. Go through that worksheet. Download the blank sheet and work through that as a little practical exercise and make that your discipline for learning the techniques for the hybrid frog trading. I think that's the way to do it. In every judo and jiu-jitsu class we ever did, it was always started off with the 10 exercises in the arm lock flow, both sides, you and your partner, and just drilling all that so you know exactly how to respond when you feel the conditions. You instantly respond and you overtrain it in a safe way. That's what we just demonstrated right here, was how to do that, building your view of the patterns. And now take as you go through there, which ones resonate with you in terms of risk and reward and certainty and confidence, and wherever you are, that's where you are. But practicing those techniques, that's how you layer those on there. And thanks to Eugene for finding eBay. So the rest of you, find more things like eBay so we have things to work on. Take good care, and we will see you in the chat room tomorrow.